Welcome, 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 Black Belts in Boardrooms audience. Every once in a while, Renard and I get to chit chatting about things, and today is one of those episodes where Renard and I get to talk about a topic that, we talk about a lot of different things, but this is one of those topics that we felt is going to be a good one. Just a little break from all the tech stuff and some of the guests that have been frequenting our show. Love the guests. So, Renard, why don't you introduce us to the topic, my friend?
Man, I think we got a good one. We kind of talked about it off the air, but I think it's a good topic for our listeners to talk about the fractional executive. It's a trend that I've been seeing that we've been seeing lately a lot more. Startups, small, mid-sized companies bringing in fractional executives in order to get them up to scale, to set some policies, procedures, etc. The ones who really can't afford to have someone on full time as of yet, and it's a trend you see a lot more. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, Amir, on this trend that's happening with fractional executives going further.
Yeah, that's a very good point you brought up. I think trend is a good word to use. And honestly, I don't know if it's going to be a long-term trend, but it's definitely something that I've become more aware of as well, like you mentioned it. So now before we get into the details, Renard, I think we should probably level set with our audience. What is a fractional executive? Maybe we should start there first and then we can get into it.
That is good. So, for our listeners who do not know what a fractional executive is, and we'll put it plainly, if you have a startup company, maybe small, mid-size, you'll call on an expert or basically pay them hourly to come in and do the role of a normal executive, but at half cost and at after a certain amount of time. So they may come in for 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year. So they'll come in and do the job of what a full time executive does, maybe get a team up to scale, maybe the business up to scale, depending on what is needed of that fractional executive. And usually, sometimes they do come on full time or they move on to the next opportunity. This also gives a fractional executive, someone who has maybe not been seasoned enough at that area, to get a chance to get some time in a part-time role, if we want to say, as an executive, to get their feet wet, to get ready for a full-time position as an executive. So you have some layers there as far as a fractional executive, but that's what a fractional executive is most of the time. They're lending their expertise to your startup, your small, your mid-size, in order to get them where they need to be in order to be ready maybe for a launch that they're doing, if they're working in AI, if they're bringing on a new platform, or it just might be a temporary solution in order for a company to look for their full-time replacement.
Yeah, thank you, Renard. I think that's a good foundation to start with. And then in my at least in my readings when I look at these stuff, for me it comes up as a CTO, a CMO, or CFO. I think maybe I see a lot more CFO type roles or maybe even a CMO type roles as opposed to CTO type roles. I know they exist, but just something that I've noticed, at least in my observation, is CTO maybe not so frequently as a CFO or a CMO. But at the end of the day, there's two sides to this coin. One of them is the benefits to the business, and then the other side of this is the benefits to the executive, who is quite literally, to your point, an expert coming in, helping the business scale. Maybe even on the topic of strategy, you can always bring in somebody who is very much seasoned in one area that you need help in, instead of bringing an entire consulting company. So sometimes that's a way to scale your business. But Renard, are you seeing anything that is, maybe more in the CIO, CTO role, or am I just the only one seeing the CFOs and the CMOs more in the fractional space?
No, I think where it really started off was your CFO. CFO fractional really started off in that space, but you do see it moving for your, like you say, your CMO. I have seen a lot of CIO, CTO in areas that I've seen, and a lot of them come in, like you say, short term, usually not full term, or they're that bridge gap that a company needs. Say they may have lost their CIO to another job, CTO to another job. Having an executive job, a lot of people don't know, it does take time to find a replacement for an executive. It's not something that happens in 2 weeks, maybe a month. It might take 6 months or even a year for them to find the right candidate. So during that time, as a person who's the CEO needs somebody, a lot of times in certain companies, depending if it's a tech company, your CIO or CTO is number two in the line of the executive team. So they need that technical knowledge and that technical strategist in order to keep the business moving forward of any deadlines or any partnerships, etc. So it's a very critical position, just like any executive position. But if you're going along the lines of a tech company, the CIO, CTO is usually your number two in that executive group, and they need that person. I've seen where, like we talked about earlier, CIO, CFO, etc., people go to other jobs. It does happen a lot. But the business has to keep running. We still got a job to do. We still got to meet these deadlines. So we need somebody to come in, and you have a lot of these fractional executives. Some of them are actually retired past executives who still want to give their knowledge and give their strategy on to other companies. So it's very beneficial to these smaller companies in these startups, because if you think about it, a lot of these startups, small, mid-size, don't have the capital or the money to bring on someone full time. They just don't. As we know, when you get to the executive level, the amount of money that it costs for an executive with bonuses, etc., it costs a lot. So bringing in that fractional person helps them keep the business running, and that's the main thing for any business. If you're a CEO, I got to keep my business running. We might be bringing on a new tool. We might be building one that hasn't gone to market yet. I need that strategy from a technical perspective or a financial perspective in order to keep the business running.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Renard. I'm thinking about the business side of things, and with the things that I'm observing, with fractional executives, is that really there's three ways in which the businesses benefit from this. There's the cost effectiveness side of it. You don't want to spend all your cash because cash is king. Capital is necessary for businesses to operate. So the cost effectiveness is one of the benefits for hiring a fractional CTO, CIO, CMO, CFO, etc. The other side of this is flexibility. You don't have to hire somebody full time for 12 months and more. You could have somebody in for a very specific purpose, whether it's helping you scale your business, put together strategy. Maybe there's an expert in a specific industry you operate in. So that flexibility to give you scalability, I think, is a great benefit to have a fractional executive on staff. And then thirdly, it's the speed. You have an expert who maybe has a broad lens on the industry, maybe has expertise in multiple industries, or at least leading in multiple industries. And that kind of experience is priceless, especially if you're a small to mid-sized business able to pay for somebody who is an expert in that. So I think those are definitely good ways in which a company could scale themselves, hire the talent they need, and then build the necessary strategy. Now, with that said, though, Renard, I do wonder, what does that do to execution? Because sometimes a fractional executive isn't there all the time. So maybe they don't build that cultural muscle that a company has, because each company will have a different, culture effectively. Well, my perspective, at least on the culture piece of it, is that if you're going to hire a fractional executive, you at least want to gauge whether there's a cultural match there too, because sometimes they may not get along with the executives, or they may get along great with the executives, but do you have the team then to put behind this executive? So to me, that team and culture dimension needs to be addressed, especially if you're a small to mid-sized business where you don't have copious amounts of cash to go throw around. Having that match outside of just the expertise is important. So what are your thoughts on that, Renard?
I agree. Culture is always important. If you just want to take the fractional executive out of the whole aspect, if you're just trying to hire somebody, they got to be a culture fit for not only the company but the team. So you're bringing in, like you say, A fractional executive, like you say, he might be great with the other executives. He might be able to speak their language, but can't speak the language of the team, and the team is still chaotic. If I'm a CEO and I bring in someone who's fractional, yes, I need them in order to match the culture and the team. The team has to be able to flow together. And if that particular person can't lead the team, then the team just becomes chaotic. We can't meet our deadlines. We can't make, if we're doing sprints, if we're doing agile, et cetera, we just won't be able to make it. The flow of the team is so important for any business, no matter what department, what position you're in. So you need to evaluate when they're coming in. Hey, if I bring this person in for a number of time, length amount of time, is this person going to be right for the business and for the culture of what we're trying to do? He might not be around, he or she might not be around all the time, but I need that person when they step in to be a fit and gel with the team as much as the team needs to gel with that executive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's I was one of the things as I was getting ready for this episode, this discussion, I was asking myself, why am I seeing all of a sudden a lot more conversation or maybe articles about fractional executives? And I have a hypothesis, and I want to share it with you and tell me if you agree or disagree, or maybe you have a third perspective. But I'm suspecting that, we went through this major pandemic, and this was a global event. And what it made clear to all of us is that remote work is possible. So you don't have to bring your expertise locally just to your community or travel to a neighboring city or state. So, in my view, I think the reason why we're seeing a lot more of fractional executives show up is because of the remote work flexibility that we all benefited from over the pandemic. The tooling got better, the communication became easier, and we became fluent in it as we started working in this kind of environment. And I think that allowed fractional executive as a skill set to really just thrive. So, at least that's my perspective, and, I don't know if you have a different one or maybe you agree with me.
I actually agree with you. If we go back, like we're talking about during the pandemic, the world realized a lot during that time. Of course, we went through something major that people lost their lives over, but from a corporate perspective, people realized that not everybody needs to be in the office in order for the business to keep succeeding. I can have more remote people. No one has to be in the office every time. So it changed the whole landscape of how business operated. You got some businesses now that don't even truly have an office anymore. They got rid of offices. We can just become 100% remote company. So now all of a sudden, part of that, because of that, you pop in a fractional executive. All of a sudden happens. So you see the change of something that happened and said, okay, everybody can work remote. I can get somebody who lives, man, even in the UK and say, hey, I can bring them on as a fractional executive for me. They have the strategic know-how and the skills of something that I'm already working on. I can bring them in for a short or long period of time, whatever is needed. So it just changed the entire landscape of how we operate. You even see it now just outside of an executive. You can see, say, hey, someone say remote work, hybrid. We only need you to fly in a couple of days out of the month, etc. There's even, outside that, there's even board members who never have to step foot into the company that they're actually advising for the most part. They just have to come on some remote calls. And if we remember before the pandemic, everybody was full time. Most people did not hire remote people at all. It was very rare. It was very rare. Even asking your company, hey, can I work remote? Used to be, one of the worst things in the world. Like, what do you mean you need to work remote? You can't come into work? Now it is a norm. Jobs are hybrid, they're remote, some of them full time, some of them just ask you to come in 3 times a week, just depending on where you work. So, it makes sense that it transcended into the executive field as well, and it also begs the question, where else will it happen? We talking about our startups down to our mid-size, but will this take effect to our Fortune 500 companies, our big international companies, or our board as well? Will it start affecting that? So that's a great question.
Yeah. There's an adjacent thought to all this remote work conversation as well, and the flexibility that comes with it, and that is, We think about gig economy and gig workers. This is like a gig worker type thing as well, except at the executive level. I mean, if we call gig working mean you doing multiple things during a day, an executive that's a fractional CTO, for example, is really working on multiple businesses. So I think from the business perspective, there's all kinds of benefits, especially if you're cash strapped or you're trying to scale up very, very quickly. But if I just flip the side a little bit, talking from the executive's lens, there's a lot of benefits as well if you're a seasoned executive to be a fractional CTO, CIO, CFO, or CHRO, or any number of those different functions. So if we flip the script a little bit to the side of the executive, I think one of the benefits that is great if you're a seasoned executive is you get to build breadth. And we don't necessarily get to build that breadth working in the same company over multiple years or working in the same industry. So having that breadth is, I think, a great way for executives to very quickly learn. Consultants get that with just the number of engagements they have. But I think that's a great benefit for executives to build that muscle across multiple industries.
I agree. I agree. There are a lot of just people who work in general who don't get a chance to move multiple different companies and become adaptable. Don't get me wrong, we're in the age where no one stays at a job 10, 15 years, 20 years anymore. It just doesn't happen anymore. But a lot of people who are already executives usually are pretty tenured where they are. So yeah, the fractional gives them a chance to, like you say, have some breath, be more adaptable, get to see different industries as well. I've gone through that in my career. I've gotten to see multiple different industries in my career. So I definitely think it is a great opening. I also think it's a great opening for someone who does not have that title as of yet. They're doing the good work at an executive level, they just don't have the title yet. They could be your senior director, etcetera. They're right on the cusp of an executive, position, they just don't have it, and fractional might be the way to go in order to gain some early experience before taking a full-time executive role. They're out there. I've seen fractional positions open for someone who's senior director, et cetera, to give them a chance. They have the expertise. They're doing the good work at an executive level. They just don't have the title for it. So I think it also gives a chance for those people who are right there on the cusp to move into that executive position to work some fractional options for them and just see how that is for them. You never know if you get a car, you want to test drive it sometimes. So in a sense with fractional executives, you get to do a little bit of test driving, not only the business does, but also the person who's coming in as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Not consulting isn't the only option, is what I'm hearing from you. If you're somebody who is seasoned and tenured, but inevitably, I think we land very quickly on the AI conversation. If I think about where the industry at large is with respect to AI, we're all kind of learning together. There's no one person who's an expert. So if I pick up where you're talking about a senior director or anything like that in other companies where maybe you're doing a lot of AI work, for example, and there's a company out there that could use your expertise to set strategy. And if you have that kind of skill set, there's an opportunity for anybody in that capacity or in that position to go and explore this as a career option. I think consulting is kind of a catch all name for just, you know, gun for or hired gun or any number of those types analogies. But at the end of the day, I think what it benefits is both the company and the expert who not only has the ability to speak the language of the C-suite or the board or even, senior leadership, but also have the ability to speak to the teams. And those are, I think, fantastic people to have on your staff without having to go and spend the kind of money that you need to put in a package for a full-time executive. So I think it's a win-win, or it feels a lot like a win-win.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's a win-win on both sides. Um, I think the trend will continue for a while. I don't see it going anywhere. I know many people have asked about would that happen on a board, etc. But I think we just have to see. AI is a big part. You know, I know we try not to talk about it too much, but AI is a trend that, and I'm going to say this: it's not a trend. Let me take that back. It is not a trend. It is here. It's not going anywhere, and you might need that expertise in it. Like you said, we're all learning together. But an executive, no matter what position they're in, if they're fractional or full time, need to step back and say, "Hey, I need to learn AI as well." I might just be, the head of HR, but I need to learn AI. If I'm CFO, I need to learn AI as much as possible as well. So I think that it doesn't matter if you're full time or a fractional executive. You want to be ready for anything that's current and coming into the future. So I think you need to prepare no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. I was as we're talking, I'm also just asking myself the question about industries. So you and I being in technology, I know we see this in our industry as well. But adjacently, I'm thinking about healthcare, for example. Healthcare, I think, is an area where probably will benefit from fractional executives, especially when we talk about finding efficiencies, optimizing processes, and things like that. I think just looking at our own personal experiences, we know healthcare is an area where there's a lot of opportunity. And I don't want to imply in any way that technology is going to solve it all. Far from it. I think it's a combination of leaders who can think in terms of processes and systems, and then who can then employ technology in a way that enables people. So maybe healthcare is another industry where I think a lot of executives or fractional executives looking to get into that space could probably learn the ropes without, going full time into one specific industry. What do you
Yeah,
think about that?
that's going back to what we talked about earlier. Be adaptable. Don't say, "Hey, I just wanna be in this certain field." Regardless of your position, even if you're an executive, look outside of the other industries. Trust me, it actually, if people don't know this, being in multiple industries, working in those industries make you adaptable, and that also makes you very valuable. That means you have a different lens than most people who just have one lens. You've seen how technology, AI, et cetera, has worked in so many different industries. You come on as a fractional executive, you can really bring some real knowledge to that area, just not having this one area. So it's healthcare is a big opportunity as far as a fractional executive because you have, and it depends what part you're talking about on healthcare. If you're a startup in healthcare, which there's so many of them when it comes to healthcare, we go again. Some of them cannot afford day one to have a whole bunch of executives starting off. So here comes your fractional who have maybe been in healthcare for multiple years, have seen it in a different lens, have been on the medical side at a hospital, maybe been on the healthcare side, as far as healthcare and insurance, and also been on the hospice side. That gives you 3 different lenses to have a fractional executive come in and really put their stamp on that area, and you might have to sit there and say, "Man, I might need to bring this person on full time. Let me have that conversation with them. They really understand the culture of what we're doing, and let me bring that person on." So, I think it gives somebody with a fractional executive a sense of 2 things. I might not wanna work full time anymore, so I'm gonna go in fractional, or for the business, this is a good chance to say, "Hey, I can have somebody come in and then have that conversation later if I wanna bring them on full time." So, I think it's a two-parter in that aspect.
Yeah, try before you buy.
100%, 100%.
Yeah. Renard, I'm chuckling inside right now, and I'll tell you why. I can't resist but compare things to my martial arts experience. So I'm gonna have to make a martial arts reference right now. I hope you don't mind.
Please do, please do.
We spar different students in the dojo, and to me, that's the kind of experience you get if we talk about fractional executives who are going into different industries, but focused on, let's say, technology, for example, but looking at technology in different industries is like sparring different opponents. It's the same style of martial art, like in taekwondo, karate, jujitsu, name your pick, but you get to learn and get to see how your craft is adaptable. Because that's another thing we learn in martial arts is resiliency. And I think a resilient fractional executive is a great benefit for an organization that wants to go, down the try before you buy path, and mid-sized enterprises with a little bit of cash probably are great candidates to go find somebody like that to bridge the skills gap.
100%, 100%. I love the martial arts reference, which is true. If you train enough, you get to, like you say, you get to try some new things. Practice is where it is. I always tell anybody, it's okay to get tapped in practice because that's where it's supposed to happen at for the most part. Try something crazy that you've been wanting to try. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So when we come back around to our discussion around that fractional executive, I think it's a good area for our newly bringing companies, our startups, to mid-size. Will it happen again, like we talked about earlier? Will it happen to our big international Fortune 500 companies? Not sure. Sometimes you need that full-time person with these companies. They've been around for a long time. It's gonna be hard for that to change into a fractional area, but you just never know how the landscape changes. The great thing about business, technology, things change over time. And you never know, fractional might become the new norm going forward later down the line.
Yeah. The as AI evolves more and more, I think we'll just get faster and faster at making decisions. I think at some point, maybe a few years down the road, we'll see some of these tools become platforms that we can all easily adapt to. And with the cognitive, I guess, augmentation is maybe a good word to call it here. The cognitive augmentation that happens to decision making for executives, I think we'll probably, to your point, also see a rise in the fractional executive. And I mean, this is, I don't know, I've never been personally a fractional executive, but it does seem like an interesting career choice for those who have made it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Some of the people I've known who've retired as an executive have switched to fractional just so they can still lend their expertise. Gives them a chance to still be around that infrastructure, that industry that they know. So you still just because you retire doesn't mean you're fully retired. I've never seen anyone who's 100% retired, if that makes sense. So fractional can work in those aspects. So you can still keep your pulse on the industry, but just not have to do it at a full time scale anymore. So it's a new thing for someone who's retiring. I think there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise for someone who's been an executive for 20, 30 plus years that they still feel like, hey, I still have something to give. I still have knowledge I want to give back. Those areas, like we talked about, startup to mid-size is a great plan. I think in going back to a little bit of our conversation, I think someone who has not made the executive step yet, this is a good area for them. If you really want to know, you feel like you're already doing executive work already, you're already there, you're already managing a budget, you're in there with the boardroom, with the board, you're in all the executive meetings, you just don't have the title. This may be the chance to say, hey, I'm gonna try this out for a little bit. It's part time. It's on the side. It's not full time, but I get to lend my expertise and actually add something to my resume to say, hey, that full time job that I'm looking for at an executive level. Now they can see, hey, I've had experience as a fractional executive. So I think there's many avenues to it, but like you say, there's some great things for our business to go down that road. So I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen next as far as the evolution of the fractional executive.
Yeah, I'm with you there as well. I think I'm curious to see if your large enterprises will take up this kind of skills gap, and I think it's more for startups and mid-sized businesses. Quite frankly, I don't know what the data says just yet, but I think definitely for the large enterprises, I'm very curious to see if there'll be examples of that out there.
Agreed. Oh man, this was a great conversation, Amir. So, there's going to be many more. I know we could have spent we could spend another 30 minutes on this one, but we will say to our Black Belts and Boardrooms audience, we will see you on the next one.